Khoi is probably best known to all of you through his amazing work as the design director of the NewYorkTimes.com, where from 2006 to 2010, he helped create their industry-leading online platform. And as a note of personal disclosure, we should say that the Walker recently redesigned its website, relaunched that. And one of the things, the questions I get is, well, what did you look towards when you did that? Because it's a pretty different kind of website for a museum. And so that we weren't really looking at other museum websites. We were looking actually at the New York Times. So thank you for that. It's been very helpful to us. Prior to his tenure at the Times, Khoi helped found Behavior, a New York-based interactive design studio. His journey to and through web and interactive media largely began on the East Coast, although he studied communication design and illustration at Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles and worked in print media in the 1990s. Most recently, Khoi co-founded Lascaux Co, which last year, or at the end of last year, released Mixel, the world's first social collage app, which brings a particularly modern method of art making and creativity to expert and non-experts alike. So I think that's a pretty interesting space, which I think I'll talk about tonight. And I, for one, am glad that he and Alan Cole introduced the basic maths theme to WordPress for bringing a little order and clarity to the blogosphere, one page at a time. So thank you for that as well. Khoi's writings and musings are part of his website, Objections.com, where he's been speaking really all over. In fact, he's just came to us from South by Southwest Interactive today. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come here to the Walker and to share your thoughts with us here at Insights. Please help me welcome Khoi Vinh.
Wow, I'm exhausted already. So one thing I forgot to ask, I didn't ask how much I can move on stage because it's being, I can go back and forth. Okay, great. So, because I've planned this whole interpretive dance, so I'm gonna, it's gonna be more of a dance than a talk. I hope you, maybe I'll just stick to the talk. Maybe that'll be better. So the first part of my talk is a little bit of my background. Andrew did such a great job on that, so I'm not going to spend too much. But this is my blog, Subtraction.com. I've been writing about design and technology and culture for 12 years. So it's kind of insane that any blog is 12 years old, and I'm certainly not the oldest blog. But there you have it. In 2010, I wrote a book called Ordering Disorder. At some point along my career, I became semi-famous for introducing grid principles stolen from the print world to the interactive world, and I wrote this book to sort of summarize all my thoughts on it, and also a lot of thoughts about interaction design in general. And of course, most people know me from being a bit player at NewYorkTimes.com for about 5 years, and working with an incredible team there. Journalists as well as other designers and digital journalists of all kind. It was really an amazing experience. But in July of 2010, I decided that I needed to leave and do something else. I really saw this kind of important shift in the market, in the design industry, where more than had ever been possible before, designers could found new businesses that could touch millions of people from all over the world, not just designers, but people who could really benefit from a designer's perspective on digital products, on interaction, and social media in general. And so I decided I really needed to take that opportunity to go and found a company. And in February of last year, Scott Ostler, my co-founder, and I, we formed Lascaux Co, which is named after the caves in southwestern France where they found some of the oldest cave paintings in Europe. And the reason we did that is we really saw a great opportunity to combine social media and one of the oldest forms of human expression out there. And this is basically what my talk is about today. And I start out usually with this concept of art, this idea that scares a lot of people. And actually, this room is probably unusual in that most people will be more comfortable with art than in most of the rooms I talk to. It's just, there's this idea, whoops, sorry. I'm just getting ahead of myself. It's just the idea that only a few people are allowed to do this. Only a few people are good enough to do this. And most people just don't even understand what it is because the definition is so open-ended. But of course, there's a group of people who are always comfortable with art and uniformly across most every nation and most every culture, and that's kids. Right? This is my daughter, who is 2.5 years old now. And this really came home for me when she started drawing, like at some point after she turned a year old. I just started observing how much time she spent each day just creatively expressing herself without inhibition, without really any worry about what she was doing or what kind of product she was producing. And certainly not worrying about her technique, certainly not worrying about mastering the tool or about producing the best possible effects from the tool. I mean, behaviorists say that kids draw so that they can sort of understand the world around them. It's one of the many activities that they do in order to process what they see around them. I mean, at the same time, they're also learning about their own motor skills and like trying to figure out like the hand-eye coordination thing. But it's not about any kind of end product. It's all about the process. It's all about just sort of getting this stuff out from her head onto the paper. And once in a while, she might fret about like how something's come out, right? But I mean, it's very momentary. I can assure you, she's very uninhibited about this because she just soldiers on. And I just think I just started looking at that and just really thinking like, it's so amazing that all of us start to do this, right? I mean, in almost every culture, like some more than others, but we all start out as kids drawing or painting or cutting things up or pasting things together. And then as we get older, we grow out of creativity, right? What happens is, gradually we start to think, oh, I can't do this. And only a select few people get to keep on doing it. So it's true, like most of us are not, in the classical definition, most of us are not great artists. But what's really happening here is the social context is being removed as we hit age 5 or age 6 or age 7 or what have you. And what happens is some of us get tapped on the shoulder and get told, like, you're really good at that. You can keep on doing that. And the rest of us, like what we hear is, you might want to stop embarrassing yourself, basically, right? Like, you're not that good at that. Maybe you should focus on, accounting or something, And there are a few of us, actually, I would say there are a lot of us who are kind of good at it, sort of moderately good, and probably really enjoy it, and will continue to get some modest praise. But there's always like somebody else in class who really gets like the praise heaped on them, right? And they really get the spotlight. And so by dint of the fact that you get sort of faint praise, you start thinking, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this, right? So losing that social context is really what's happening here. But we have the situation now in the 21st century where social context is one of the things that we have in great abundance. You can find any kind of social context that you're looking for online. There's hundreds of millions of people on Facebook. There's hundreds of millions of tweets being sent every day on Twitter. Like, if you are interested in the most obscure thing, regardless of how appropriate or inappropriate society finds it, you can find some other group out there online who can help support that activity. You just have to know, first of all, that you're passionate about it and that you would benefit from finding these people and from continual exchange of information and communication with them. The interesting thing about social media is it takes activities that we previously thought only experts could do, and it democratizes them. And some of the biggest examples, I'll just run through them right now with you. So a few decades ago, very few people would ever have dreamed that they were qualified to participate in journalism or reportage of any kind. And then blogging came along, and WordPress, and movable type, and then Twitter, and so forth. And now journalism is an open conversation that everybody feels that they're qualified to at least take part in. And certainly, some of the most pivotal reporting from the past 5 years is coming from amateurs, whether it's Arab Spring stuff or Occupy stuff or what have you. It's really opened up in a way that it hadn't been a long time ago. Same thing happened with video, right? I mean, video is an inherently complex technical task, or filmmaking, I should say. And yet, you have countless people on YouTube and on video who are not professionals, and they're just actively creating sometimes quite sophisticated, narrative products and disseminating them on these video platforms all over the world, and creating amazing things like the Coney video, the most virally successful video ever. Just never would have happened in a world before social media. Photography too, of course. Photolog, and then Flickr, and Facebook, and Instagram, and now there's a whole raft of mobile photography products out there that you can take part in. Photography, I think, is particularly interesting because if you were to go back into time 2 decades, and it's 1992, and everybody's sitting around, dressed in their grunge wear, and you were to tell them, in 2012, everybody in this room at the Walker Art Center is going to be carrying around a camera that they pretty much carry around 7 days a week, right? And not only that, not only will they have that camera with them 7 days a week, but in the past 5 days or 7 days, they will have taken the equivalent of a roll of film, meaning like 12, 24, 36 exposures. And most of you have probably taken that many photos in the past, 2 or 3 days, and not the past 24 hours, right? It's just the idea that people would have the hardware, this thing that was inherently technical and reserved for experts, and the idea that you would even want to record that much photographic information on a daily basis was just incomprehensible just 2 decades ago. And then even you go back before that, before really, really successful consumerization of photography. Like in the early part of the 20th century, people only had a couple dozen photos of their whole lives. And now we have that many of like the past X number of hours of our life, right? So I think photography is really interesting example because it really shows that anything that can be social will be social. And I think that's really worth repeating. Like, this is the prevalence of social media is going to continue unabated. It's not reaching a peak at all. It's just at the beginning. And there are going to be many, many different kinds of disciplines, of subject matter areas, and portions of the economy that are going to be transformed by social media. And it's going to create a lot of really interesting opportunity for governments, for culture, for entrepreneurs, and for people interested in creative self-expression. So everything that can be social will be social, and that includes, I believe, this concept of art or visual self-expression in the narrow definition I'm using this evening. We can use all of the dynamics of social media to lower the barrier to entry to art, and it's something that is almost inevitable. And the reason I believe this is because if you look at the transformations that I was talking about in journalism and in video and in photography, it wasn't just that social media came along. It was also the idea that there's a pattern here where hardware and social media, social software come together to lower that barrier to entry. So just to go back again at those 3 examples, you could always, from the dawn of the commercial internet or the consumer internet, you could always write your stuff and put it up online. But it really started to take off when the software came along, whether it was Blogger or movable type or what have you, and people started acquiring laptops for the first time. So suddenly it was possible to publish really easily through the software, but it's also possible to create this content without having to sit at your desk at work. You could take this laptop home with you, you could sit on the couch, you could sit on your porch, or you could take it to the coffee shop, wherever. And that's when blogging really started to take off. So it was that combination of hardware and software. The same thing with video, right? The flip cam, came along, and then also, digital, handy cams and so forth, where you could get the recorded information in digital form and manipulate it easily with like an iMovie or with another editing package, and then distribute it on YouTube and its predecessors. And the same thing, of course, with the digital camera, right? The digital camera made all of these social products, these social photography forums possible in a way that it wouldn't have been before. So I really believe that we have that situation again today with the iPad. It's the same circumstance where you have what is really like the perfect tool for digital art. If you think about, Apple sold something like 50 million of these, and for the most part, people are bringing iPads home in order to do their email and to check Facebook and to watch videos and play games and read magazines, right? For consumption, as they like to say. But the iPad is a far superior tool for creative visual self-expression than a Wacom tablet ever was, because the learning curve is minuscule combined to a tablet or to a mouse. And suddenly you've got tens of millions of these in the homes of people who don't think of themselves as artists. And that's the opportunity that really made me open my eyes and say, that's huge. That could be transformative for society and for culture, and hopefully for my bank account. So again, so you have this pattern, right? Tablets and art. We think that if somebody can create a social software complement to tablets, that we can lower the barrier of entry to art, to creative self-expression in a really profoundly new and different way. And I really believe that with these two together, I think we'll show that most people are inherently creative. I think it's probably true that not everybody is inherently creative, but I think many, many more people than we consider to be creative today are actually creative. And I think photography shows us that. A few decades ago, like very few people would have really indulged in any glimmer of interest in photography because they would have thought that it wasn't for them. And now almost everybody is a photographer. And I think that same kind of transformation can take place again with art. And for us at Mixel, that's our mission. We really want to help everybody to rediscover their creativity. And we really believe it's a worthwhile mission because there is a real imperative out there. We talk over and over about the challenges that the 21st century is posing towards us, and this idea that we need innovation, innovation, innovation in order to rise up to those challenges. Innovation comes from people who consider themselves creative, people who think creatively, and it will have a meaningful impact on the social, the cultural, and the economic parts of our world if we can fully embrace this as a culture. And I just want to add this one quote from Ken Robinson, mostly because I think he makes a much better argument for this than I do. He's written a couple of really amazing books, The Elements and Out of Our Minds, I think both of which are worth reading. He says, we have to recognize that cultivating our natural powers of imagination, creativity, and innovation is not an option, but a necessity. And I think that is a really important point because up until recently, I think it's always been the case that we've thought, well, it would be nice if everybody were more creative. But facing a billion Chinese who are going to be more efficient at doing many of the things that we've built our economic success on to date than we are, I think it's going to be absolutely mandatory that we fully embrace creativity going forward. And I really encourage you to go to YouTube and look for Ken Robinson's TED Talk from, I believe it was 2006. It's absolutely worth your time. It's amazing, and it's also really funny, actually a lot funnier than I'm being tonight. So that's the big picture for Mixel, like our lofty big vision. I'm going to show you now how it works. So Mixel is a social network. We are trying to combine art or creative visual self-expression with art. So like any social network, there's a concept of your identity, and then people can follow you, and you can follow them back. So when you first open up Mixel, you have the Updates tab, which shows you all the work that people have made in reverse chronological order. This is the most recent stuff. You also have a My Mixels tab, where you store all the work that you've made and also keep all the stuff that's in progress. And then you have the Popular tab, which is the best stuff that the community has voted up, and that's updated continuously. You can jump into anybody's profile and look at their body of work, see who they're following and who their followers are, and so forth. So this is pretty standard social network type of stuff. So if it wasn't already obvious, the kind of visual self-expression I'm talking about is collage. People make collages inside Mixel, and I'll show you how that's done. It's really simple. All you have to do is tap on that Start a New Mixel button, and you'll get a new canvas. And the first thing you do, of course, is you want to add an image. You tap that button in the bottom right, and then we have a number of options. We have what's popular on the network. I'll talk more about that in a minute. You can bring in photos from your iPad, from your Facebook account because you're authenticated with Facebook. You can do a web image search, which we'll demo in a moment. You can also, this is a new feature, you can, if you're looking for some random image, if you're looking for inspiration, you just keep hitting the Load More button to get random images to work with. The web image search works just like a Google image search. You can search for any term, and then you get up to 100 results. You can preview them and say, OK, this is the one I want. And then you can drop it into your canvas. And from here, this is where the beauty of the iPad comes into play. It's just completely intuitive, multi-touch gestures that allow you to manipulate the images without having to climb any kind of learning curve the way you do it in an Adobe product. You can pinch and zoom to enlarge it, to rotate it. You can go into a crop mode and basically just use your finger to cut out the parts that you don't want. And then tap Done, and then it's there. And then you can continue to add more images, to manipulate, to flip, to do whatever you want. The tools are very, very simple. And in fact, we've kept them primitive in a way, because we really don't want people to feel like this is a tool they have to master. I mean, going back to the example of my daughter just sitting there with a marker, there weren't settings and preferences and things to tweak in the marker. It was just the tool, and you just use it however you used it. And we've really tried to make it so that you can get started really easily, and that it'll take very little time at all to create something that, even if it's not high art, it's visually satisfying. All right. So, yeah. Exactly. All right, so what's happening behind the scenes here is when you're pulling in these images, regardless of whether they're from your iPad or Facebook or a web image search, they're being uploaded to our server. The server is keeping a full copy of them, and it's sort of doing so in a way that we like to think of as object-oriented art, meaning that the completed Mixels are not flat JPEGs the way they are in a photo sharing app. So if you open up an Instagram or a Flickr, the end product is a single image. But our collages, we sort of retain all of the object level information, meaning that you can go into any of these collages and explore them, quote unquote. What happens is the app reassembles the images. You can see the image was pulled together really quickly. And this is posted by someone else, so you can actually tap around and sort of see how it was put together. And if you'll notice the thumbnail at the bottom of the screen, that shows you the original uncropped image. And it also shows you every other occurrence of that image. So this one image of Jeremy Lin has been used 37 other times. And all those thumbnails represent all those other connections. So in a way, we think of the images as almost like having a social life of their own, where one person introduces them to the network. But then they sort of migrate out from beyond that one collage. People reuse them. They go out. They take on new meanings as people crop them in different ways and juxtapose them with other different kinds of images. So that also means that every image is available to anybody else to use. So if you add a picture of Jeremy Lin, you do so with the implicit agreement that anybody can go in and pick it up and reuse it in their own collage. And that means that there's never a shortage of stuff for you to work with. And that was one of the key things that we tried to do. I mean, the simple act of collage, just sitting down at a kitchen table with scissors and a magazine, it's only as fun as the source material that you have. If you've only got like one, thin in-flight magazine, it's going to be a pretty boring experience. But if you've got a whole, trunk load of old magazines and stuff that you've collected from everywhere else, it becomes a lot more interesting. So every time somebody creates a collage with new stuff, they're adding to the overall, stockpile of available content that anybody else can pick up. And that means you can go and you can cherry pick things one by one and put together a new collage on your own. Or if you don't want to go through that laborious process, you can actually remix any collage. You can look at a collage and say, oh, that's an interesting, expression. That's an interesting idea. I actually have something that I would like to create in response to that person, to that artist. And all you have to do is open up the collage and then tap on the remix button in the bottom here. And the app copies over all the pieces from that original collage and arrays them on a new canvas. And you have full control over all the pieces now. That means you can also go back into the original source material. So you can see that here we're drawing a new crop. And even though it's a new crop, it's still connected, again, to all the other occurrences of this image of a waterfall. So it actually becomes kind of fun, like a piece that you think is really simple and straightforward, like this piece of a sky. Once you tap on crop, you'll see that it's actually like a matte painting that somebody found from The Empire Strikes Back, right? And so you can crop out a different piece of it, and it takes on a whole different kind of meaning, and then you can put it on the canvas and create some other kind of response to the original piece. And even, again, with a different crop, it's still connected through the server to all the other occurrences of that piece. So it's a really powerful dynamic that makes sure that there's always something for you to use, and also that they're all connected in some way, and you could even follow the pieces around. So when you're done, what happens is your remix gets added to the end of this thread, as we call it, of remixes. So one person will kick off a new thread, somebody else will hit remix, and their remix will get added to the end, and then somebody else will remix it. And this can go on and on and on, and then the horizontal scrolling just gets longer and longer and longer. In a way, these are like visual conversations. That's an idea that I'm going to return to in a minute. But our sort of guiding principle as we were trying to construct this experience is we knew we wanted to create something that was very, very alien to the existing world of creativity apps, like the Adobe apps that you've seen out there, because we're really trying to get people who do not think of themselves as artists and who do not want to climb a really steep learning curve. And the guiding principle, of course, is to combine or to align the consumption mode and the creation mode so that they're very close together. And we found that when you do that, when you force them to be as similar as possible, you essentially force simplicity. And I think that's a really, really key idea for interaction designers of all kinds. If you allow the mode for creating a piece of content to be very different from the mode of consuming it, you're creating this gap into which complexity often just rushes to fill that gap. And so we really try to keep things as closely aligned as possible between the consumption and the creation. So now that you've got an idea of how it works, I'm going to sort of take you on a tour of who is using Mixel. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. So and I've been a designer for a long time, and I've written my blog primarily for a design audience. My book was primarily for a design audience, so it's no accident that I've been lucky enough to bring a lot of those designers into Mixel. And so we have a lot of folks like this guy, Sonongo Akpem, who is a young designer who lives in New York City, just really, really talented guy. This is some of his work. He's actually not one Mixel. This is about 36 Mixels that he's done. He essentially created like a whole typeface from collages by tapping the remix button on somebody else's collages and cropping all those pieces and combining them in a new way to form letters. I'll give you a closer look at like the letter B. It's just completely exquisite, really, really beautiful stuff, right? And again, this is just with the finger, right? And there's no guides in the app. There's no templates or anything. He just goes ahead and just almost crudely puts it together, and yet somehow it turns out in this very sophisticated manner. This is the letter Z, right? Just gorgeous work. I mean, clearly he has a very sophisticated visual sensibility. And it's very gratifying to us to see somebody do something so amazing in the app, especially somebody with such talent, finding the app to be creatively satisfying. I think that's terrific. But we didn't really build it for Sonongo. If it was a tool that was only used by designers, I think we will have failed at our task, because generally designers and illustrators and artists, they already are comfortable with this idea of self-expression. They know that they can do it, and they are relatively uninhibited about doing it. So a lot of the folks on Mixel are almost the antithesis of designers. This is Monty Merritt, who is just an amazing artist on Mixel. If you can't tell, he's a lawyer. He lives in Oakland. He's a father of 2 kids. He's just made really terrific stuff on Mixel, using some of the pieces that you've seen already. I think what's really terrific about it is they have this almost storybook-like quality to them, where he's sort of combined things very simply, but I think very, very effectively. So John S. DeFord, actually one of my favorite examples of a Mixel user. His background is in human services. He worked as a director of behavioral health. He's worked with the handicapped. He's done policy, done fiscal work, etc. The reason he's in the wheelchair is he suffers from multiple sclerosis, and he uses Mixel as a sort of release from those symptoms. And if you look at his work, first it's really exquisitely beautiful in a way, but also reminds me a lot of the kind of tension-relieving crafts that folks have been doing for a long, long time, like knitting or quilting, this sort of stuff. These beautiful, almost tapestry-like pieces of work. And if you look at the technique, it's sophisticated, and yet it's not sophisticated. There's really nothing here that nobody could do. It's just about combining stuff in interesting ways. Marie Ennis, she is an elder care worker. She lives in South Australia. And I think she's really interesting because she's never considered herself to be a visual artist of any kind. That she's always been musical. She's always gravitated towards like sounds and the oral. And it's actually almost funny to look at her work because it's really, really musical, almost melodic in nature. Some are like these really like dramatic pieces, right? This is like just an amazing musical composition that just happens to be visual. Some of them are really melodic and lyrical in a way. David Jacobs, he's like a blogger, a software engineer. He takes a different approach to Mixel altogether. He's actually the one to introduce Jeremy Lin almost the moment like Linsanity took off. Did that reach Minneapolis? I'm hoping I'm not talking about something that's completely foreign to you. So he's just made like completely goofy, funny stuff with Jeremy Lin involved, and he totally embracing like that dad humor kind of punning. Which is great. I mean, the response inside the network was terrific. Lindsey Donaghy is an example of almost the perfect example of the kind of person we're trying to reach. So she really enjoyed art as a child, and when it came time, and she actually even studied art for a little bit, but when it came time to choosing a career path, she decided to become a software engineer. She lives in Arizona. And so Mixel has been a way for her to sort of get back to that other side of her that she has not been able to nourish for a while. And she's just, been very, very prolific in creating a wide array of works, almost as if she's had this pent-up energy that she's letting out and exploring in different kinds of ways. Bev Rogers, she's has a home business, has 2 teenage boys. She's a baker. Her business is baking. Created just really terrific stuff. She specializes in cakes, and actually, her work actually looks like cake-like or almost like festive in a way. And even this one, which is like a smashed glass, is really decorative in an unexpected way. And again, these are really simple compositions. Just finding interesting bits of images and then combining them with other interesting bits of images. Cindy Vanderven, her husband is retired, and so she left her job as a teacher, and they've been traveling the world and embedding themselves in other cultures and learning their languages, learning their customs, trying to understand what they value in life, and trying to see the world through their eyes. And she says that there's a lot of solitude when you're becoming acclimated in different cultures like this. And she uses Mixel to sort of while away the hours. And if you look at her work, it's very, very serene and peaceful, and sort of it makes me think that maybe I should be traveling the world too, instead of trying to build a company. But it's just really, it's funny how these simple expressions are very indicative of who these people are. So, I mean, the point I'm trying to make here is that there are people from all walks of life who are doing this. Everybody can do this. It's not just people who are already aware of their artistic ability. It's people who are indulging something that nobody else has encouraged in them for a long, long time. So I'm going to take a break from that for a moment and sort of talk about the idea of creativity and how it's like a cultural imperative, as I said before, or economic imperative as well. And if you go to Amazon.com and you type in creativity, you're going to become sort of inundated with books trying to teach you how to get in touch with your creative side. And some of these are really valuable books, offer a lot of great advice. And I've looked at a lot of them. But I think the thing that is that they all have in common, the baseline, is they all try to get you to embrace free association, embrace this idea that things that you don't think that go together, it's worth just trying to imagine some kind of linkage there that you normally wouldn't imagine. And really that's what Mixel is about. But if you think about the social web at the same time, it's actually a pretty literal place. I mean, you think about Facebook and Twitter. I mean, it's generally all text-based, and it's really all about saying very explicit things about something that you're experiencing. And it's all about words. It's all about expressing yourself in very clear terms. And I think that's starting to change. I think Mixel is indicative of that, but I think the trend started well before us. I think with Tumblr, which is blogging, almost like image blogging, in a way that WordPress and Movable Type and other blogging services were not about nearly as much. And Instagram certainly is almost like an expressionistic kind of a social network. And Pinterest, which is really taken off in the past 6 months or so, I think is another great example of a kind of expression that really you couldn't really put words to. Just collecting random stuff together, not really saying explicitly why these things are important to you, but just sort of putting them out there as these sort of piecemeal representations of who you are or what you're interested in or what you value, I think is really interesting. And I think we're going to see that more and more, that the social web is going to expand beyond this idea that we just express ourselves literally. I mean, of course, we engage the world through much more than the literal. And there's this concept of there are as many as 9 different intelligences through which we engage the world. Of course, like traditional education and the first phase of the social web is really about the first 2, right? About like the verbal linguistic and about the mathematical and the logical. And now I think we're starting to see some of these other things. Like SoundCloud is a great example of musical intelligence, about people expressing themselves through music, both as creators and as consumers. I think we also have the visual spatial, which is of course what we're interested in. And the way this intelligence is defined, it's about understanding what your eyes see and also being able to see with your mind, being able to envision things that aren't there and then turning them into reality. Essentially, it's about free association, about creating things that aren't necessarily there in the real world. And that idea of free association, I think, it really plays well with the threads that I described earlier in Mixel. They're really, I think, a really powerful platform for allowing people just to free associate in a way that they normally don't. And I'll show you some examples. I mean, some of the examples are quite straightforward, right? There's this one really successful thread where people just took this goofy picture of Leonardo DiCaprio and just put him in a countless number of unexpected situations, just over and over and over again, right? So this is totally like fun, goofy, free association, right? Like you would never expect Leonardo DiCaprio in Planet of the Apes, right? And this is, I mean, there's a whole meme culture on the internet, which is in part about this kind of thing. Yeah. But it's not just about that very straightforward kind of free association. A lot of it is sort of playing on subtle ideas that you couldn't do this kind of stuff in a tweet or in a Facebook status update. Here's one that people are just sort of counting, right? Starting off with numbers and thinking about things that those numbers bring to mind for no other reason than there's a random association there, counting from 1 to 2, Noah's Ark, on and on like this, right? 4 seasons, etc. And there's no central mind organizing this. It's just somebody just threw out a Mixel starting with a number 1, and then people said, oh, well, I'm just going to extrapolate on that idea, and then other people join in, and it just goes on and on. The Magnificent Seven, Seventh Seal, so forth. Here's one where people are, again, not explicitly, but sort of implicitly designing a creative brief. They are creating this thread around or inside of a box, trying to replicate like a diorama kind of project, like from your childhood. And there's very few images aside from that interior of the box that carry over from remix to remix. It's just sort of people, just again free associating. Some of them are very graphic, right? This one is nothing more than playing with graphics and just sort of seeing what the results look like and feel like. I mean, there are no words that you can use to this. Now, actually, one of the reasons we left out a caption field is 'cause in so many instances, there's just nothing that would make sense. We don't want to put people on the spot to actually assign words to the creations that they've made. And some of them are just like weirdly bizarre, right? That one was, I guess, thankfully short. So the remix threads are a way for people to spur their creativity and in a way that they wouldn't be able to through like an exercise they'd read in a book or through another social network or something. You get these sort of volleys of half ideas or half form ideas, and then you volley back in whatever way strikes your fancy, and it's really fun. It's really satisfying. It's a lot like if you've ever gotten a like on your Facebook status update, or you've ever been retweeted in Twitter. The idea that somebody was responding to you is very, very powerful. It's conversation. In this case, it's visual conversation, a different kind of conversation altogether. But the key element of it is that it's fun, right? And it's like these people are not thinking about art as they're doing it, right? What they're thinking about is this is just engaging. There's no criteria for what I'm doing. I'm not going to be judged on it in any kind of of academic way. There's no consequence to it. I can just do whatever I like and then sort of see what comes out of it. I just added an exclamation point in there just to make my point. So really, this is our journey. So this is what we're focused on, is the idea of defusing creative inhibition. And the life of our product as we continue to iterate on it is going to be about, each time we're going to try and get better and better at getting people to sort of lower their guard and try this out and sort of give over to this idea that anybody can do it. And we're just at the start of that. We're really just at the version 1 of the product, and we have a lot of plans for it in the future. But we've already learned quite a bit, and I want to share with you a few of the lessons that we've learned so far. First of all, encouragement is key. It's just like I was talking about how you lose that social context. We're trying to restore that social context. So you're in an environment that is largely, if not exclusively, supportive and constructive. And one of the key parts of that is this idea of being able to like things. You can, as you browse the network, you can tap like on any number of Mixels, just like you can in Facebook. You can just like as much as you want. And we sort of felt like that's how most people were going to communicate through the app, even though there are quite a number of comments. But for the most part, people are sort of communicating their approval through a simple like action. But we really knew at the same time that we were creating a non-literal environment. So we shouldn't make people express themselves in words if they wanted to go beyond the like concept. So we have this, so as soon as you like something, the app asks you, okay, do you love it too? And this is sort of like a super like, right? Where if you tap on this, the person on the other side knows that you really feel strongly about their work. And the reason they know that is that each week you only get a total of 5 hearts to distribute, right? So you know if you receive one of these that somebody spent 20% of their love on you that week. And it's actually turned out to be a really, really powerful driver in the community where people make these connections when they receive a heart from somebody else. And the community is, in a very short amount of time, has become very close-knit, and they're very active about encouraging each other to do more of this stuff. It's really amazing. This idea that they're all in it together. They're basically all teaching each other how to use this medium that is brand new to everybody, and it's through these little gestures that they're able to recreate some of that encouragement that you had when you were a kid. So the next lesson I want to talk about is it's still $19.99 for the iPad. Actually, can you raise your hand if you own an iPad? Okay, so it's a pretty high percentage of number of people in this room who own iPads. And that sort of bears out with what Apple has been telling us in terms of their sales figures. So this is a chart that shows you the number of units shipped each quarter, starting with the first quarter that Apple shipped its iPad in 2010, the quarter ending June 10th, when they sold probably like 3 million or so iPads. The most recent quarter on record that ended December 2011, they sold 15 million. So they went from 0 per quarter to 15 million per quarter in about a year and a half. That's pretty remarkable rate of growth. But it's not nearly as remarkable as what's been happening on iPhone. So 15 million last quarter, 38 million or something phones sold last quarter. And of course, this line starts out way before the quarter ending June 10th. It started out in 2007, second half of 2007. So iPad is certainly growing at a faster rate, but the cumulative total of phones shipped, or phones sold, I should say, is pretty enormous. On top of that, you want to think about all the Android phones that have shipped out there. So everybody has a phone, and a small but growing number of people have iPads. And that's been a really, really big challenge for us because I think the folks in this room are pretty special in terms of owning an iPad, but a lot of our users are probably the only people in their social circle who have iPads. And that's been really difficult for us in terms of growing a social network. And if you look, well, this slide just goes to the point where in just this year and a half, Apple's shipped more iPads than phones shipped in 2.5 years of selling the iPhone. So the rate is really, really healthy. But the visibility within the network is still restricted to people with iPads. And it's not nearly as prevalent as we would like it to be. So one of the things that we've been working on recently and that we just launched last week is this idea that you can see into the network through a web browser. When we launched, we had pages like this that showed you just the Mixel, just the collage, and if it was part of a thread, you could tap through the thread or click through the thread and see the other things. But you couldn't go and see, you couldn't click on the user's avatar, the user's name at the top, and go and see all of their body of work. And that's basically the way like an app like Instagram works. And Instagram is on the phone, of course, and it has, again, much better market penetration. So what we've done is we've gone back and revised our web presence. So now that you can see all of that person's body of work in Mixel, the screen is a bit washed out, I'm sorry. But additionally, if you tap on the second tab there, you can also see all of their favorites. So when you go through the app and you tap on like, when you tap on a collage and you like it or love it, it shows up here in, on your web profile. And this makes for a much more open-ended browsing experience online. It sort of shows you that in these early days, the iPad experience has to be complemented by a web experience or by a phone experience. The third major lesson that we learned is this concept of being able to reuse every image is very powerful, but very scary for anybody who wants to use their personal images. So if you're going to open up a picture like this that is very intimate in a way of your kid and her friend, what the app does when you say, okay, I want to use this in my canvas, is it gives you this very prominent warning that says any image that you add to Mixel can be used by anybody else, even if you've cropped it. And so what we've seen is this is a big deterrent to using personal images, which is something that is a real drawback for us, because we really want people to use the images that are most meaningful to them. And I think one of the things that we're going to be experimenting with is this idea of private threads. The idea that you can create a Mixel and share it just with your coworkers, or just with your family, or just with your friends who went out with you over the weekend. And only they can see the collage, only they can remix it. Additionally, any image that any of them add to this thread will be secure within the thread. So you won't be able to take that image and reuse it for some other purpose. It always has to stay within this one remix thread. And of course, we have to be careful that the private side of it doesn't undermine the public side of it, because if it was just a private, if it was just a tool for making private threads, private remixes, it would just be a collage tool. I think what makes Mixel great is that everybody is contributing stuff that anybody else can reuse over and over. Lesson 4 is that making something out of nothing is really hard. This is an amazing Mixel that was posted early on. It's a rendering of a woman, and if you see as the cursor is tapping on each of the pieces, the original source image isn't changing down below, and that means that this person, Andrew Ho, made this whole image from one abstract painting, one image of an abstract painting. He's essentially cutting out very strategically the parts that he can use to form a face, to form a neck, to form shoulders, to form hair, and so forth. It's really staggering. When I first saw that, so my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that somebody was able to get such sophistication out of what are really very primitive tools. And this is, on the one hand, very, very gratifying for us, because it's just really, I just feel great when I see something like this. But on the other hand, it's a real danger, because it immediately got voted up onto the popular tab so that everybody was seeing this. And the side effect is that a lot of people who come into the app and see something as amazing as this, they automatically start thinking, oh, I can't do this. That's not for me, right? So this idea that you can come in and you can make something out of nothing works for some people, but for a lot of people, especially when they see work like this, it's very, very intimidating. They still have that problem of the blank canvas, right? Not knowing what to do with that first mark, getting beyond that very first step. And what we're going to be trying to do is add. Well, I showed you earlier the ability to get a random selection of images, so you can start with something if you don't know what to start with. That's a new feature that's coming soon. We'll also be adding editorial features. We've done a few experiments on our blog where we've sort of posed a challenge to the community to see to see how they responded, and the response has been really good. So we'll be adding an editorial layer that gives people some kind of prompt, something to respond to when they first come in. It's just this idea that if you're not comfortable with art, you sort of need some kind of direction to get you going in the right way and get you feeling like you can respond to something concrete. It sort of plays into the fifth lesson, which is, self-selection has been our biggest challenge by far. This idea that I can't do this is really, really difficult for us. And a lot of people come to the app and say, well, this isn't for me, like over and over again. But we also find that a lot of those people, once they give it a chance, they get sucked into the app, they really become highly, highly engaged. I mean, our engagement numbers, as we refer to in the internet business, the amount of time people spend, the number of actions they take within the app is actually really quite high relative to other social networks. And of course, we really believe that everybody can do this. So, our big vision is to do exactly just that, is to convince everybody that they can do it and release really a torrent of creative energy from millions of people from all walks of life. That's really what we're out to do. And even if we fail, we really also believe that this is an inevitable eventuality. I think going back to some of the arguments I made earlier, I fully believe that somebody's going to do this. You've got this iPad selling millions of devices a month. And again, we've never had an opportunity like this before where there's so much capacity to make art out there. And we've never had this circumstance where we've had social networks moving towards this direction. If you step back from a Pinterest board, like the one I showed you earlier, I mean, it is a collage. It just has not been collaged together yet. So we really think that it's going to happen, whether or not it's Mixel, but we really do believe that it will be Mixel going forward. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much. I'm going to take some questions. I'm just going to put up this screen if you want to download the app. It's free in the App Store. You do have to have an iPad. And if you want to email me, you can do so at this email address or follow me on Twitter, etc. So, question there? Yes.
Hey, thanks for coming. It's a little bit more of a product pitch than I was expecting, but to follow that along, to take that to its logical execution, how are you going to make your money?
So, well, first, the idea behind social networks is you sort of bring these communities together. So certainly it's like a product pitch, and certainly it's a business. But if we can make that happen, again, going back to the example of digital photography, there's any number of revenue streams that you could generate, whether it's producing hard goods, like generating a mug or a print or a T-shirt, or value-add subscription kinds of services. The idea that you can put together like a special presentation of your work online. You pay a nominal fee to do that. Private threads may be something that we charge a subscription for. In-app purchases, this idea that you can buy tools to enhance what you're doing. I think also what's really interesting is the art is touchable, meaning, like I said, with a photo sharing app, it's just one single JPEG. So if everybody's taking a picture of a tomato, you don't really know that in a photo sharing app, but we know it explicitly in our environment because this single piece is being reused over and over again. So we can see what's trending, and there are all sorts of interesting possibilities that come out from that. So, I'm sorry?
Like a logo commercial. I didn't see any logos or commercial.
Well, certainly it'll be commercial. I mean, to make money, it will be commercial, yes.
You've been bringing order to chaos, grids to, a mess. Is this level of sort of chaos just driving you absolutely insane? Do you want to bring chaos or order to what you're seeing here? And then second question is there any legal thoughts to sort of this level of reuse?
So the first question is, do I want to tidy everything up, right? I actually don't feel that impulse at all. So I started out in art school drawing and painting, and actually a lot of my paintings were very collage-like. I was like the Rauschenberg kind of work was really what inspired me early on. And from there, I somehow found myself, doing interaction work, doing user interface stuff, doing stuff that brought order to chaos. So I think there's a lot of that kind of work for me in building the app. But the thing about doing work in social media is it's a very interesting organizational problem because you're trying to essentially engineer like the unexpected. You're trying to create a system that gives users just enough guidance that they can do things that you never expected them to do. And I think that's really, really fascinating sort of aspect of design that I think is different from this idea of just wanting to impose order on everything. And I don't think I've ever wanted to impose order on everything. I just want to create just enough so that people do things that I never expected them to be able to do before. Any questions?
And this Mixel is directed more for kind of adults that are trying to get in touch with their artistic self again, or what do you think about maybe kids? I've got an 8-year-old who might really enjoy using this. Maybe you won't get so much into the social aspects of it, but how do you feel about them trying to get some use out of this tool too?
I think we see a lot of parents actually using the app with their kids. And we also see that in a lot of instances, they don't share it back to the network. And that's one of the motivations behind creating the private threads part of it, is the idea that they can share and let only trusted folks remix their work. And that's, we certainly want that kind of activity happening. We launched with Facebook login only, which has a kind of a high barrier to entry for kids because you have to be 13 and up to have an account, and even then you have to have parental consent. So we'll probably be doing some other things to get people into the app, or get kids into the app in a more kid-friendly or family-friendly way. Yeah, that's for sure.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, but if you look at the network, the activity in the network, well, first of all, we require some kind of real or verifiable identity. We don't let you create just a random username on the fly the way you can in a lot of social networks. And that's because a lot of the forums through which you can share art online get pretty racy pretty quickly. And we also moderate that kind of content within the network so that even if you're a kid who doesn't have an account, you can browse through it, and it's pretty safe to look at what's being made.
Is that built into some of the web searching too, if you're searching for images?
The web search is not right now filtered,
okay,
though we hope to make it filtered.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see.
How many people are employed by Mixel, and where did you get your development money?
So there's 5 of us in total. I founded the company with Scott last year. He's a developer. And when I left the New York Times, I started thinking about this idea, and I hired a contract developer to build a prototype of the same idea but a different execution. And I used that prototype to get me meetings with potential investors, with advisors, and with potential co-founders. And I basically networked like crazy and eventually met Scott, and we really hit it off. And he founded a site called dump.fm, which is somewhat similar. It's a little bit more meme-oriented. I think he calls it like a real-time image sharing application. But he had a pre-existing interest in visual self-expression. So he and I formed the company in February of 2011. It was basically just the two of us and one contractor who worked with us for about 6 weeks, who got the product to launch in November. And then from there, once we launched, we had a little bit of buzz, so we were able to recruit another developer. So that's the third person. We have a community manager who runs the blogs and does the Twitter and the Facebook stuff, et cetera. And then we have a full-time designer that we brought on as well. So.
Can you talk a little bit about copyright issues that you
right.
run into?
So, first of all, we comply with the DMCA, just like any social network. So if there's something that is a violation of copyright that you own, you can file a DMCA complaint, and we'll take it down. And this is the way it works on, on Tumblr, on Posterous, and on Pinterest as well. We obviously really believe in copyright and protecting that work for its creators. But if you look at the network, these users are not just repurposing or I should say, are not just replicating work that's found elsewhere. I mean, if you look at Tumblr, I mean, it's a copyright, violation engine 24 hours a day. Our users are engaging in fair use. We really firmly believe that. They're, in many cases, creating things that are unrecognizable from the source material. And that's I think that's a real value that we believe in strongly. So going forward, we're going to create some other measures to help protect that kind of stuff and make it simpler for people to file complaints. But we haven't had any complaints filed yet. Next question.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. So who owns the copyright for images that are created, the collages? Can people print them? Can people create them and sell them? How creative of a tool do you envision this to be as an engine?
The collages are the copyright of the users. And there are some rights that you agree to under the terms of use that you share with Mixel. But there currently is no mechanism to sell them within the network. You can certainly save out a JPEG and do anything you wish with it, and that's sort of like has nothing to do with us right now. If we do allow people to generate like hard goods and stuff, I think we would start out by letting you only do that for stuff that you've created, at least in the beginning, and then we'll work through that. I mean, this area is controversial, to say the least. This whole idea of who owns what when you're creating these derivative works. And we really believe that we're creating something that is valuable to a lot of people. Certainly, we've seen it that way. And we're willing to sort of figure it out along the way, which will, I'm sure it will become uncomfortable at some point, but we think it's worth it. Other questions?
Hi, I'm curious why you have it so that you log in using Facebook. Like, what's the advantage for you, or do you pay Facebook for that? And because I know Pinterest does that too, and I'm sure other apps too, and I'm just curious what the benefit of that is.
Sure. So why do we log in? Why do we ask you to log in through Facebook? It's probably not going to be always the case. We're going to probably roll our own, so to speak, account login system. But there are a number of reasons we launched with Facebook straight out of the gate. First of all, creating your own account system is non-trivial for a two-person company. When we launched, we were a two-person company. So you get a lot for free with Facebook. Certainly, we're aware that a lot of people have objections to Facebook. And we heard that really strongly when we first launched. But we also believe that the idea that you're attaching your real name to these works is really valuable to the whole community. First, it mitigates against the potential for abuse, for picking up an image that somebody else has used, like a personal image, if somebody has used a personal image, or even remixing another collage of non-personal images in a way that's rude or offensive or inappropriate somehow. And we've seen very, very little of that content inside the app at all. So I think that's been one of the plus sides of Facebook. From the user's perspective, if you're comfortable with Facebook, you also get quite a bit. You get your whole social network there. You get the ability to share it with people that you know, and we'll be taking more advantage of that going forward. But we don't want it to necessarily be the only way forever. It's the way that made the most sense at launch for us.
One more question.
Sure.
Is that a service that Facebook sells to businesses, or is that something you sought out from them?
No, it's part of their API. It's free to any developer, so you just have to agree to certain terms of service. And when you log in, you basically ask the user for certain permissions to access your information, your account.
Hi, I'm wondering if I can get you to prognosticate about something that you didn't really touch on. Maybe you danced around the edges of it. Mixel looks really fun, and I love to play on my iPad, just like everyone else does. But for 8 hours a day or more, I've got to work, and I have to produce and edit and write and publish serious documents, interactive experiences. And when I look at Apple trying to make my laptop more like my iPad, or the rise of tablet computing or the rise of mobile, I worry how eventually I'm going to get my work done. And so I'm wondering if that worries you as well. I'm one of these people that I want my laptop to be my laptop because I got to work, and I want my iPad to be my iPad. So I'm wondering if you could maybe talk through that a little bit.
So I think your main concern is on the laptop side, right? That it's taking on more and more of the qualities of your iPad and maybe taking away some of the control that you had been used to previously. I don't know if I can talk to very meaningfully about what Apple is thinking over there. I mean, it certainly frustrates me sometimes too. What I believe is that Apple's position is that computing is too complex for too many people. And there are a lot of quote-unquote overhead things that you do on a desktop that you just shouldn't need to do given the technology that's available today. I think one of them is managing your file system, like the whole Finder, the fact that you have to negotiate this huge array of nested folders is pretty unnecessary in 95% of the instances. I mean, a lot of times when you're doing that because you have to do it, not because you're actually trying to achieve some kind of goal. So, and if the software can abstract that in such a way that still allows you to get your end goal accomplished, I think Apple believes that they should be doing that in general. I really don't believe that Apple is going to be taking it so far as to make the computer, the desktop, laptop experience as restrictive as an iPad. I think, before he passed away, Steve Jobs talked about this concept of the computers that have been in the market to date are like trucks were in the early days of automobiles. The first really effective use of automobiles was to truck stuff back and forth and basically do business-to-business commerce. And then the passenger car came along and removed a lot of the power of a truck, a lot of the management required for a truck, and sort of let everybody just get to where they wanted to get to. And in that analogy, desktops and laptops are like trucks, and the iPad and iOS devices are like cars that let people do what they want. Like most people have no idea what goes on under the hood of their car. And I would say that at least for a long time, people who operated trucks were pretty familiar with what happened with their truck, like under the hood with their truck. So, so that's, I think, where things are going. I think, though, that the iPad, Apple has done a lot to try to get people to think of the iPad as more than just a consumption device, and has tried to elaborate like on their iWork suite and make it possible for you to do quote unquote real work on the iPad. And I actually think that's kind of a mistake. I think there's a certain kind of activity that you want to do on a multi-touch device that's very different from a laptop, and it's something that, again, I think is where consuming and creating are much more closely aligned. So I think early on you're going to see Apple continue to emphasize word processing and spreadsheets and stuff, but I think in the long run most people will continue to do that stuff on their desktops and laptops, and there will be new kinds of activities that really make sense for a multi-touch tablet, that are really native for a multi-touch tablet. I think that's going to bear out. I mean, with every new technology, it starts out looking somewhat like the old technology in order to give people a familiar frame of reference so they will be willing to adopt it. But long run, it's going to take on its own qualities.
So you were talking about breaking down these barriers to creativity. So do you see kind of the evolution of this concept that you created through Mixel evolving and becoming more complex, more robust, and involving multiple forms of media? So instead of imagery, using video, audio, all these other things.
Yeah, the answer to that is yes to the robustness. I mean, if we're successful in letting you manipulate static images the way we are now, that will create a platform where you could potentially manipulate animated content or live or interactive content in a similar way. We certainly would want to be able to do that, and to be able to add sound or other media effects to what you're doing. It's definitely something that we're interested in going forward. I mean, the key though is keeping the tools as simple or even as primitive as possible, and that's been really successful for us right now. It's just the fact that when you're cropping something, it's so imprecise that it's liberating in a way. Like what we find is people feel like, oh, nobody's going to be able to get this right or perfect, so I don't need to worry about it. And I'll just focus on doing what I want to do and like juxtaposing these things together. And in fact, sometimes people go out and they buy like a stylus, which you can get to cut things out, and they find that their productivity in Mixel, quote unquote productivity, goes down the tubes really quick, because all of a sudden, like the added control, the added precision becomes an obligation or a burden that you have to carry as you're executing your idea. And because you can get something more perfect, you feel like you have to spend the time, and it becomes less fun. So we'll add more robustness, but we probably will not add more complexity if we can help it.
Is it my turn? Okay, there was something that you said earlier that really got me thinking. You talked about bringing the ideas of consumption and creation as close as possible as one of the goals for Mixel. And that got me thinking about this idea of immaterial labor. And I wonder if you're aware of this concept and what your thoughts about this are. Mm-hmm. And if not, I'll just sort of compare this to what happens with Facebook, one of the biggest companies that just recently sold, billions of dollars changed hands, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And effectively, the company employs millions of people who willingly create content for free. And Mixel appears to be a similar model in that under the guise of creating this, unleashing the torrent of creative energy, we're essentially employing a bunch of people to create this content.
Right.
I wonder what your thoughts on that subject are.
Well, I wouldn't say that we're employing them to create this content unwittingly. I think the people who are doing this stuff are getting a very real, very immediate reward or byproduct from it, even more so than we are. I mean, we're not generating any revenue from the app right now, so you could say, you know, they're doing it on our backs, so to speak. So that's certainly not the way, you know, like our actual attitude towards it. So, I mean, this is the bargain of social media, is you get this opportunity to connect to other people and engage in these activities that are really not possible outside of this bargain. And the other side of it is that, you know, there are, you know, certain information that you give up, certain rights to your content that you give up, et cetera. And, you know, it's worked, right? Like 700 million people, I think that's the last count, are registered Facebook users. A huge number of them are active on a daily basis, like 200 million tweets a day being created. And you're getting incredible value out of it. You're getting real, on-the-ground, you know, reporting, like during like the Arab Spring, that you never would have gotten if you really went through that model where these people had to be properly employed. You never would have gotten that stuff. You know, you're getting, you know, a new form of information delivery and consumption that is just trumps, you know, most of what quote unquote old media is able to do. You know, you're getting connections with people who you otherwise wouldn't know. I mean, some of the people on our network are, you know, have formed incredible bonds in a very short amount of time. You know, somebody like John, who has multiple sclerosis and is often, you know, confined to his home, he now, you know, communicates with all the other kinds of people. So I certainly don't look at it as, you know, unpaid labor. I think that's really kind of an unfair characterization. I think the idea of consumption and creation is it's basically a new paradigm. I mean, Paul Sappho is a futurist. He talks about this being like the creator economy, this idea that when you consume, you're also creating new kinds of value. So when you search in Google, you're getting a very real benefit from it, immediate benefit, in less than a second. At the same time, you're contributing something back. You're creating new value for the other users, because whichever of the links that return that you click on the other side, they're registering, okay, this is the most important to this person. In aggregate, we can tell what are the most effective links. That's created a search engine unlike anything else that's ever existed before. Oh yeah, so I'm not sure if I understand the actual question then.
Well, the question is really about this sort of amorphous ethics of that situation. I mean, it's clearly often beneficial to the users.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact also is that it's a company, every one of those companies, Facebook, Google, et cetera, makes huge amounts of money off that transaction, of those singular interactions.
I don't see how that's bad.
Okay.
Okay, sure. I mean, there's certain things that, like, especially regarding privacy, there are certain lines that it's not clear where the line is drawn, where it should be drawn, and certainly with Facebook, you know, there have been instances where you could say they've abused privacy and so forth, and I think that is clearly a controversial area, and where I would say most of the tension lies, but the basic arrangement, I think, has produced real value and is beneficial for both parties, and I think it's a good thing. Other questions? Okay, thank you so much.